Hello, everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Conscious EFT. We are your hosts. I'm Jen Cincurak.
And I'm Nancy Forrester.
And we are here to teach you this wonderful technique that we've had in our lives called EFT, or Emotional Freedom Techniques, sometimes called tapping. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. And we're here to teach it to you in a really conscious way so that you can in a phased approach, easily introduce it into your life and start seeing what happens for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's kind of exciting to be here with you, Jen, and to be thinking about sharing this technique that you and I have used for so many years and had incredible benefits from it. And so to be spreading the word about it I'm just delighted to be having this conversation with you.
Awesome. So before we get into the guts of this conversation, Nancy, do you want to just give everyone like the really small nutshell version of who you are and what you do and why we're teaching this together?
Okay, yes, great idea. So I was introduced to EFT tapping in the late 90s, 1998. I took my first workshop, and it was really, really brand new then. And it's grown and expanded, over the last 25 years. It's totally different than it was back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And the colloquial word is tapping because it involves tapping on certain parts of our body. And we'll show people how to do this. Certain parts of our body that really access the nervous system in ways that allow us to come into a calm and centered place in our bodies. So I'm the founder and the executive director of Canada's National EFT Tapping Training Institute. We call her NEFTI for short, NEFT-TI. And I founded NEFTI about 8 years ago when I saw that what was happening with emotional freedom techniques was exactly what had happened to yoga about 15 years before. So we watched yoga and we watched mindfulness, quite frankly, come from the fringes into the mainstream. And so that's exactly what's happening with emotional freedom techniques, is what started as only a grassroots movement from founder Gary Craig I saw what was coming in that it was going to start coming into the conventional organizations, our educational institutes, our mental health institutes with our mental health clinicians, and so on and so on and so on. And I thought, how can I support that? I went, okay, well, these more conventional, traditional places, they like institutes. They like to know that there's a background, backup to this. And so I built an institute, and that's the National EFT Training Institute. And we are across Canada and the northern states, and we professionally train and certify and mentor coaches and clinicians and people who want to be coaches and clinicians in the highest standard of professional EFT. And it's such a joy, every day to open my inbox and hear the stories of what people are saying this strategy has done for them. And I know you and I are going to talk about specifically what it is that EFT has helped us to do. But that's who I am in this moment. How about you?
So for me, part of the reason I'm here with you, Nancy, and bringing this to all of you watching us is that I am also a big EFT fan. I am by training a naturopathic doctor, though at this very moment I happen to be on sabbatical or inactive in practice because I've been immersing myself in this. So for the last handful of years, I've been running a podcast where I've just been interviewing trainers like yourself, Nancy. In fact, this is where Nancy and I met. And basically just helping, like you, people to get the word out and be able to use this technique in a safe way, but also because it's something you can take with you and you have with you all the time, because for years I've worked with patients who they need I can't be with them all the time. They need something in hand. And so Nancy, you and I felt like, why can't we just do a mini part series of teaching people very slowly the background and how to use it very slowly. I mean, introducing it in a step-by-step way into your life so that it's really, really safe. It's not like, here's yoga. Now, go upside down and do this crazy handstand, right? You can't do that. So
Absolutely right.
how can we
And
help
that,
people?
that was the challenge for me as a psychotherapist. So when I was introduced to EFT, I'd been a psychotherapist for probably 10 years. And the biggest issue was compliance with what I was suggesting to clients to do in between sessions. And so there was still this kind of dependence on the time that they were spending with me. I didn't have a very simple way that was
Mhm.
that was so straightforward and so effective, so that when people would engage, they would feel the difference, and then that would add to the motivation. They go, well, then I'm going to do some more tapping, because wow, that was so effective in the moment. I feel calmer, I feel better in this moment, so I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again. and
Mhm.
and then that commitment to taking that action, wow, the transformation just happens so much more quickly when you can integrate EFT within the strategy.
Awesome. Awesome. And
Mhm.
everyone, we're going to get into that as we go and how to move it into your life and what you do. But for now, Nancy, can you tell us what is this EFT tapping?
Yes. Well, it really depends on who you ask. So, uh, back in the day when I was first introduced to this, there was absolutely no research. We had no idea what the mechanisms were. We were just kind of like tapping all over our bodies and going, wow, this is an amazing experience, but we didn't have any science to back it up. And so today that's totally changed, right? We've got,
Hmm.
just profound amounts of scientific research and all the peer-reviewed journals, and yeah, it's all there. So if you ask one of those researchers what EFT is, they would say it's a cognitive, somatic, evidence-based strategy to effect change in the nervous system. And they would,
That's a mouthful.
that's a mouthful. They would throw in a whole bunch of other words about trauma and resolving trauma and and it's all true. However, if you ask a clinician or a coach what EFT is, they're going to drop the whole science piece, and they're just going to say, this is a modality that allows me to be present with what is true for the client in every single moment. And in coming to a place of peace and acceptance of what is, it opens the gateway to all the possibilities of change. If you ask a client, they, by and large, they don't care about the science. They don't care about this whole, nervous system thing, but they do care about the results. And so clients would talk about, EFT gives me a tool for my anxiety in the moment. EFT for anxiety really helps me feel calmer and lighter. EFT for anxiety helps me just tackle my day in a way where I'm just more present, and I feel more comfortable. I feel more confident. I feel more connected, and all of those beautiful C words that describe the experience of a human being that's feeling present and calm. So emotional freedom techniques, EFT, is what we call a meridian-based technique to impact on the nervous system in a very simple, quick, and effective way. So as we have our conversation, of course, we'll teach people where these acupressure points are and how hard to press on them, how often to press on them, all the ins and outs. We'll get into that as we go.
Yeah, and we will bring in a little bit of the science,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we'll try not to make it too heavy. Like Nancy and I are practitioners, and I have such a physiological background. I want to know that. So for those of you out there, we will discuss that a little bit and give you resources to get more, so that we're not boring the people who are like, no, no, I don't want to hear
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So
Yeah. We're both science junkies, right? My background was
yeah.
science. Yours was too, but
Hmm.
we'll find some playful ways to make the science a little bit more digestible.
Yes, yes, great way to put it. So Nancy, as we're getting into this, can you tell everyone how you came across EFT? I mean, you've already hinted at it before, but can
Yes.
you tell us a little bit of your story? Because everyone out there listening, pretty much for everyone who gets into it, it's not like this, oh, I found this technique and I immediately used it and it was just so easy and I didn't have any resistance against this because it looks a little bit odd.
Yeah, especially back in the day, right? It looked a lot odd.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I am not your poster child for adopting EFT or straight away. I was, it feels like a different life now, but 25 years ago, I was having an experience where my life was literally collapsing in on itself. I had this, what looked from the outside like a really beautiful life. I was um, teaching at a community college here in Ontario. I was being wooed to move into leadership in the community college system in Ontario. I was newly pregnant after 7 years of infertility and infertility treatments, and it was like, everything looked great. And then a whole series of external events happened in my life. Uh, People closest to me, they just all died at the same time. And there were just so many changes. And then I gave birth to this child and went into what now we would recognize as postpartum depression. But 25 years ago, it wasn't even known, it wasn't even spoken about. So I went into a huge and profound anxiety that I didn't have any tools or strategies for how to handle. I went to 13 different doctors trying to find a
Hmm.
solution to what was going on. I didn't have chronic headaches. I had one headache that was relentless. There was nothing. I wasn't sleeping. I was in a lot of trouble, and and so it was out of that I decided, oh my gosh, I really need to get some help. And so I found someone who was a body worker, and I found a psychotherapist, and I started on this healing journey. And
And wait, and Nancy, I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's a couple things I wanted to point out because I
yes.
I have heard you tell this story before. One is also that your long-term central relationship also fell apart.
Oh, yes. Oh, forgot to mention the
Wow.
22-year marriage.
And but the other thing was you said, so I went to a body worker and I went to a psychotherapist, but
Yes.
I know we've
Oh,
talked about this before, that you're very traditional Scottish Presbyterian heritage. There was
absolutely.
no room for
There was,
psychotherapists.
oh my
Mm-mm.
gosh, it's like productivity. That's how you hang your hat on productivity. And so when I needed to step away from this career of mine, oh, I just went into an enormous amount of shame, and I experienced the lack of self-worth and self-esteem that I had that had been covered up by all my accomplishments and achievements in the world. And when that went away, when I wasn't physically able to do that, I just got thrown into, now I recognize it was like I got thrown into the trauma of my childhood. But I had that so firmly covered up with productivity and effectiveness that I didn't even know. I didn't identify it as such. That only came later. And so as I became um, more ardent about this healing journey and understanding how little I had understood about the world before, and went back to psychotherapy school and got credentialed as a psychotherapist, opened my practice, and I was about 7 years into that practice when there came just a moment of disillusionment with what I was able to do with people as a psychotherapist. I mean, nothing against my training, and people were happy to be in my office and were really pleased with my services. But what I found is that we would tackle one issue in their life and they would get some results on that issue. But as they got results in that issue, another area of their life would fall apart.
Mm.
And it was kind of like, I have two ways to describe it. It was kind of like, when you've got a big balloon and you squeeze the balloon on one end, it's like you squeeze it there and the other end starts to puff up. So someone could come into me and they wanted to tackle weight loss. And so they would get some results around weight loss. Meanwhile, the relationship would go into disarray. Or the other metaphor I use is like when you think of the Titanic and how you rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? You're making change, but the overall issue is still present. And so my science background really led to me to start contemplating What's missing here? There's got to be a bigger story that none of my training or experience is teaching me. And it was in that moment of this, what I'm calling disillusionment, this curiosity about something bigger, I got this invitation to go to an EFT webinar, not a webinar, sorry, a training, a 3-day training. And I went. I didn't even know what the thing was, but I went. It was like, doesn't even make sense. However, I walk into this. There's 4 other people in the room, and they're all tapping on their faces. And I said, get me out of here, right? But, that Scottish Presbyterian heritage you mentioned, like, stood me in good stead because I'd already paid for the workshop. So I was like, I'm not wasting that money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stayed, and I had the most profound experience. It was around my mother. My mother and I had, she was a wonderful mother in terms of providing food and shelter, but she was not capable of providing the emotional nurturance. So we had a pretty rocky kind of, not a very close relationship. And so in that first EFT workshop, I had this profound experience of compassion and gratitude that I have never experienced before. And that captured my attention. It's like, okay, it looks really wooey and crazy, but something just happened here. And so I paid attention. I came home, I practiced a little bit. And then, as you were saying, one of the common themes is people get introduced to this, and then it's like somehow ended up on the shelf. And for me, it ended up on the shelf because I let that part of me that was so dependent on the science and the logical piece, I let that part get in the way of my actual practice of EFT tapping. And so that was my resistance. It would be, I'd do a little bit of tapping, then I'd go, no, this is wooey hooey. I can't be seen as a psychotherapist who's asking people to tap on their faces. So it probably took me a couple of years as the research started to come through, and as I started to just address the reality of my resistance, to really begin to wholeheartedly bring this as a daily modality. And that's when I started to notice changes. And as I started to notice changes, that's when I got to the place where I can't not introduce this to my clients, right? In all integrity, I have to let them know that this actually exists in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
and from there, it's been it's been a nice, steady, sort of awesome experience with EFT. That's mine.
Lovely.
What's your background?
So my story with EFT is that I didn't have a big issue because I'm trained as a naturopath, and in Canada, when you train as a naturopath, you have to train in traditional Chinese medicine.
Right.
So I've inserted thousands of needles and seen lots of great results, right? So that the idea that you were just going to tap on a acupressure point rather than put a needle in, I was all for it. Yeah, high five, let's do it. Then patients who have needle phobia will have an easier time at this. That part felt okay with me. It does look a bit weird to be tapping on yourself, but I was okay with that. So I was introduced to it because I had my own naturopath brought it up to me briefly. And she sort of casually was like, oh yeah, you can just use some EFT and change that. And it was a really big thing. It was like a core belief or something. And she was like, yeah, just do that. And then we're going to prescribe you these things. And I was like, what's this EFT? So I asked a colleague of mine who also was a therapist prior to becoming a naturopath. And she was like, oh yeah, here's someone who you might want to look up. And YouTube was very new at the time. This must have been like 2007 maybe-ish.
Yeah.
And so I watched one or two people introduce the tapping points and talk a little bit about it. And then I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
And didn't really think about it too much. Somehow it came into my awareness then. And Gary Craig, who is kind of the inventor of what we call EFT now, I read through his little free book. And then I started trying it. And then I started trying it with patients.
Mm-hmm.
And darn it all if they weren't getting results. It was, and I would say,
it's
and
a
I was
little hard to believe.
It is. So I would just use this with patients who I'd been working with for a while, who had good rapport with. And I'd be like, well, we're going to try this crazy thing rather than putting needles in. We're just going to, do these things. And there was a longer protocol that used to be used. So I was using that, and there was humming and whatever. And they were like, what are you doing here? And then 2 minutes later, they'd be like, I'm not stressed about that
I
thing
know.
at work
It's like,
anymore.
where did that go? They say.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. But then I
Ah,
moved cities, moved clinics, like all this crazy stuff happened. I moved. And then I kind of forgot about EFT because it was just
yeah.
like a new kind of fun little thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't use it for a long time. And I was working at a clinic where I was with a lot of people who had been traumatized in motor vehicle accidents. So I started exploring more trauma therapies and somatic experiencing and
Mhm.
really getting into that. And then I went on maternity leave to have twins.
Mm.
And when I was up in the middle of the night feeding babies, then I would be so wide awake because I was kind of
Right.
burned out and I was wired and I couldn't fall back to sleep. So then a naturopath that I had sent my patients to was telling my patients, oh yeah, you can just rewire your brain using this technique called EFT. And I was like, there it is again. Okay. So I bought the training manuals because I'm a student for
Yeah.
life. I
Yeah.
bought the training manuals, read through those bad boys, and then I started listening to every and any YouTube video, podcast, summit, anything and everything there. I probably listened to thousands of hours. So
Yeah. Yeah.
while I had the babies at home and I wasn't working, that's what I was doing. So then when I went back to work, it was like full steam ahead. We're going to
Yes.
use this.
Yes.
And then it finally was in my life. And then I got to practice it for a couple of years, got quite good at it, had a practitioner myself. And finally, when my kids were old enough that I could leave them for a weekend, I did a training with you.
Ah,
And it was,
yes.
even though the content of the training, I pretty well knew because I
Yeah.
had studied so much, the physicality of for 3 days doing this was amazing. And like I've been to so many continuing education events and like learning how to use this and that with your clients, but by far this was hands down the best.
Ah,
Someone had advertised it on
thank
your
you.
website as it was like a spa retreat for your brain. And I was like, I want that. And it honestly was. It was
Yeah.
so wonderful. It was such a great experience. So
Thanks, Jen.
that's my
Yeah.
EFT story. And that's why I feel so strongly about podcasting and doing this video series and bringing it to you all.
Oh, absolutely. It's just so exciting to see the word spreading so quickly. Particularly, I mean, my real passion or the meaning of my life is all about children, and in particular the emotional safety, the emotional well-being of children. Because I just, in my gut, know that if we can help children uh, deal with their lives in a more emotional, energetic way, if they can stay within the calmness of their nervous system more often, deal with their fight and flight and freeze and all that stuff, right? If we can do that, then these children can grow up to be the brilliant people who are going to find the solutions to these problems that we're facing on a global level. So, at my stage of life, it's really all about what can I do here to help these children have these opportunities that they haven't had before. And I know you're similarly passionate around why you do what you do, Jen. What's your big deal?
I feel the same way that you do about, can we help all of the humans on this planet
Yeah,
just have an easier experience of
yeah.
life and just feel like more connected to their purpose and what they
Hmm.
want to do here. And
Hmm.
honestly, doesn't that just sound good? Like, I just want to feel better on a day-to-day basis. I want to feel calmer. I want to feel like I'm doing the thing I'm meant to do and
Hmm.
just really good about it day in,
Hmm.
day out.
Hmm. And
So
we're actually being who we're meant to be. And so when we've got this tool, this technique called EFT, which is so simple that even, these young children can do this for themselves.
mhm.
It's like, I'm so excited that we're having this conversation to help that evolution along.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting. And we want to bring all of you into this. Look, we can't have you here in the video with us, but we want to know from you, when or how long have you been using EFT? I just said it was around 2007. Nancy said it's been 20 some
Yeah,
years.
1998 was my first workshop.
Very cool. So for all of you listening, can you just comment below? You just have to say 6 months, 20 years, whatever it is for you. We want to know from you, how long have you been exploring this world and using this?
Yes, that would be great.
And so next time in part 2 of this series, we are going to get into, well, first, we don't want to hold back. So we're just going to show you how to do it. For any of you who haven't used it already, we're going to give you just a quick tutorial on how to use the basic formula of this.
Yeah.
But then we're going to get into, in this world where we have yoga and mindfulness and all of these other really wonderful techniques, why it's still worth your time to learn this beautiful technique.
Yeah. Yes. Looking forward to that very much.
So stick around for part 2 of the series and join us again for our second episode of Introduction to Conscious EFT.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, everyone.